Hello and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast with your host Amanda Woodward. And today we are talking all things staying in the market. And what prompted this subject matter today for a impromptu podcast episode was two conversations that I had with landlords. One is investing in Stoke-on-Trent and the other one is investing in a completely different area in the south of the country. And both landlords were calling for a little bit of advice in terms of whether they should sell and exit the market. Now, those regular listeners will know that I am very bullish in terms of remaining in the market and staying in the property game. But I thought I would just give you a rundown on a few of the reasons why and the conversation that I had today with those particular landlords. So I'm going to cover some of the more obvious reasons, quote a few statistics, and if you're thinking of potentially selling, it might just help you with your decision either way. So with higher interest rates, higher mortgage costs and the new property regulations, some landlords are considering selling their rental properties. But history shows that holding on to the rental property is a far smarter financial decision in the long term. And as I said, those that listen to Paul and I on the podcast will hear we're always talking about investing for the long term. Property is a long-term game. Making money for 4 years, not making for money for 1 year is not a reason to exit the market. It just means it's been a bad year. Doesn't mean that things won't change going forward. So there are some investors who are panicking. We think that would be more than likely a costly mistake to exit now. And we think that staying in the game is the best strategy. But let's just have a little look at house prices. So reason number one is really growth over time. Now, indisputable that over time property prices increase, usually between 50 to 100% every 10 years, depending on the cycle of the market. So in the northwest of England, as an example, in the last 18 years, prices have increased by 77%. That's from 2005. And that includes the financial meltdown of 2008 as well. So we're still 77% up, even after that horrible financial crash that we had that started in the US and then came over to the UK 2008, 2009. The West Midlands has increased by 85%. Since 2005. Again, that's taken into consideration financial meltdown, pandemic, changes in governments, war, the whole 9 yards. We're still up 85%. So property investing does consistently outperform the stock market, certainly outperforms the banks, and generally has low volatility. So long-term property investors will always come out ahead as long as you stay in the game. And I think it's also about having a diverse portfolio. I mean, we invest in the stock market, we invest in shares, we even invest into the crypto markets. We've got, a diverse portfolio, heavily outweighed by property. It is okay to be diverse, but property, always wins long-term. So that's my first reason. Second reason is there's been a change in the capital gains tax, which means that selling now means you have to pay a lot more tax, which is a bit of a bind. So our capital gains allowance has dropped down to £3,000, which is so nominal. It's rather unfair. If you were selling a rental property for, let's say, £250,000, that you bought for 150,000, your taxable gain would be £100,000. Now, previously you could get 12,500 tax free. Now it's only 3,000, so that extra 9,000 or so gets taxed at 24%. So it's not, a game-changing reduction, but again, it's still giving more money to the government than we did before. So it does have a factor in terms of, if you're deciding to sell or not. Third reason is demand for rental properties. Now, it doesn't matter where you're investing in the UK, generally speaking, demand has been off the Richter scale ever since COVID. Now, it does peak and trough. And this winter, HMOs have been down a little bit, but no doubt they'll be back in their peak from sort of spring and summer onwards this year. But it doesn't matter whether you're looking at one-bed flats. I mean, you can't get a one-bed flat in Stoke to rent. It's ridiculous. Houses, HMOs, the demand is strong. Rents are going up year on year. Last year nationally was 4%. Last year in the Northwest and the Midlands was more like 6 to 8%. Spare Room reports a 10% increase on room rent demands across key cities like Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham. So, the demand is always there. And I think secretly we know that. And that's only going to get more and more strong because the government doesn't meet its targets, not even close to meeting its targets in terms of house building. They've promised planning reform, which we're not really seeing anything locally at the moment. So it's still hard to bring new properties to market, whether that be flats, houses or HMOs. So the demand is, it's always there. It's always there. So that's my third point. So a quick recap. So the first one is all about property prices increasing over time and staying in the game. The second thing is the change in capital gains tax makes it less advantageous to sell. Third is demand, which is at an all-time high. Fourth is that, yes, interest rates are high, but they will drop. Now, I'm probably a little bit too young to remember this, but I do hear of that period when people were buying properties in the late 70s and 80s when interest rates were at a shocking 15%. Now, most landlords paying interest rates of sort of, say, 6 and 7% at the moment think that's absolutely horrendous. And it is a little bit high. It's nowhere near as high as it was before, one, but two, they will drop. Okay, they will drop. So mortgages kind of peaked really 2023, but they have started to drop. And fingers crossed the Bank of England, well, they are expected to cut rates by end of 2025, probably 75 basis points. And lower interest rate means more cash flow. So just stick with it. I think it would be crazy to look back and think, I sold that property because I couldn't really stomach a couple of percentage point increase in my mortgage when your property could have, gone up by, say, 50% in the next 8 or 9 years, but you sold because of your interest rates are a little bit high. Now, we've got a whole bunch of property, and on some of them, our interest rates have doubled, our mortgages have doubled, and you do look at the cash flow statement and think, oh my goodness, that mortgage of $450 a month is now like $850 a month. Maybe the cash flow's gone down from, say, 900 to 300 or 400. Putting some increase in utility bills, maybe it's just about washing its face, but that's only for now. Two things that are going to happen. Price of property is going to increase and rents are going to increase. Over time, the debt's going to erode. Over time, interest rates will drop a little bit. And guess what? We'll probably go and have another season of interest rate rises at some point as we go through the cycles. But property is very cyclical. And you just got to hold on to your hat when things are a little bit tough. But the good news is that even if we do absolutely nothing, we go to sleep for 5 or 10 years, wake up again, as long as we've got a good agent, your property is going to be worth a lot more and your rents are going to be worth a lot more. And I think we do have to look at it from that macro perspective. Otherwise, with every change in government or every world event, we're going to be constantly chopping and changing our strategy. Now, if you're investing in the stock market, then you probably would want to chop and change your strategy depending on world events, because that does affect equities and it does affect, how the stock performs. But when it comes to property, it's get in the game and stay in the game. And it's those that stay for the long term that ultimately win at the end. Okay, reason number 5, well, kind of covers on from reason number 4, really, that we need to have a hedge against inflation. Okay, property is one of the best protections against inflation because rents will continue to increase. House prices grow faster than most other investments, and they certainly grow faster than the value of money depreciates. Mortgages become cheaper in real terms over time. I mean, my parents will laugh because they bought their first property for £30,000, had a mortgage of, I think, about £35,000, because back then it was get a mortgage at 100% and a little bit extra to do a refurbishment. Now, 25 to 30 years later, that £30,000 property is worth maybe £800,000 or £900,000. It is in London, so it's had a nice boost in appreciation because of location. But the £20,000 or £30,000 mortgage 30 years ago, when your property's worth close to £1 million, it's just so insignificant. So your value of the property will just erode and depreciate. The mortgage will erode and depreciate over time. But if you sell now and you exit the market now, you don't have that inflation hedge. So that's reason number 5. Reason number 6 is that property does outperform stocks and savings over time. So, for example, I was looking at the nationwide house price index and comparing it to the FTSE on the stock market. So average UK house price growth over the last 10 years has been 56%. The FTSE over the last 10 years has been 42%. And then if your savings are in the bank, it's pretty much nothing, nothing to 2%. So again, you're in the right space when it comes to holding property. The other thing is my last point 7, which is about the government's changing legislation and changing housing policies, which inevitably will drive out the amateurs in the market and will drive out those that don't want to, stomach the changes, which will reduce supply. And a reduced supply is not a bad thing because those that stay in the game, it means that rents increase with a reduced supply. So all in all, the government is looking at building 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. And, governments just overcommit every single time and underdeliver. So will they do it? I don't think so. I don't think Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer are best suited to sort of bootstrap and rebuild the housing, fix the housing crisis and rebuild houses in the UK. I just can't see it, but that's obviously just my political opinion. So look, they're my 7 reasons why you must stay in the game, or I recommend that you should stay in the game, stomach the changes, let the amateurs leave the market. As the saying goes, don't wait to buy property, buy property, wait and reap the benefits. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I look forward to sharing more with you coming up on future episodes to come.